Okay, so today I'm going to go over what a MAC valve and a solenoid are. So this is going to be your MAC valve, this is going to be your solenoid. The reason I'm going over this, I get a lot of questions about this. People ask me, what is that, or what controls my air, or what controls my water. These are two very simple devices that control very important things in your car wash. Air is always very touchy. Water is much easier to work with, obviously. The worst thing that can happen is a big leak or you run too much water. With the air, you have to be way more cautious because you can damage cars very easily, and this is essentially what's going to be cleaning the product. If you don't have your air moving in and out properly, then you're not going to be cleaning cars properly. So we'll start with the solenoid. This one will be a little easier and a little quicker to go over. So this is your basic solenoid, okay? So this is going to be called a water tree. You're going to hear that term a lot if you are an F1 or an assistant manager. So these water trees here, it has your water in, obviously. This is your main shutoff valve. So if you ever need to shut off the water to all these solenoids, you'll just turn this off in the off position, and that'll cut all the water off to these, and you can actually work on them. So the first step is going to be turning this valve off if you ever need to work on these. So you have it off now. And you're going to come over to this solenoid right here. So essentially, these solenoids are pretty simple. What you need to understand about them is on the inside, and I'll take it apart here in a second, but on the inside, it's going to have a spring in there with a pin. And these are normally closed solenoids. So when there's no power to it, the spring decompresses and it's going to plug the hole in there and not allow water to come through. And that's why it's called a normally closed solenoid, obviously, because when it's off, it's not going to allow water to go through. So when you want it to open, we send power through the MCC and the relays. So power comes through this plug, 24 volts are these ones, and once this senses the power, or once it's energized, it pulls the magnet, turns on an electromagnet, and it pulls the pin out and causes water to start flowing out to your application. So let's say this one's mitter water. Once the mitter relay clicks on, then the electromagnet clicks on, pulls out your pin and your solenoid, and allows water to flow through the tube freely. I'll make another video here to show you how to take these apart, and maybe that'll further help you understand, but they're actually fairly simple. We use solenoids for air and water. They're essentially the most important thing in our car wash. If we didn't have them, then we wouldn't have a way to turn them on or off. This is going to be an air solenoid, sorry. This is what's going to control all your air turning on and off. It works in the exact same way, normally closed, plugging the hole. When the power turns on, it's going to pull the pin out and unplug the hole and allow air to go through there. So it works in the exact same way. They look the same, it's just they're different sizes. Once you're done working on something, obviously don't ever forget to turn the water back on. Okay, so that's going to be the solenoids. If you ever have any questions about solenoids, you always can ask me, and they're fairly simple to work on. So that's something that, starting as a manager, you should be able to do on your own. This over here is a MAC valve. So these MAC valves are really simple devices as well. They can look confusing and intimidating, but they're actually quite simple. So this one's labeled roller up. So if I push it, it's going to fire, and it's going to send a roller, my piston up, and then if the chain is moving, it's actually going to send a roller. It's not moving right now, but if it was, it would send the roller, okay? So essentially how these work are the same way. So these are normally off, in the off position, okay? So without power, it's not sending anything, or it's going to be in the out or down position. And then once we turn on power to it, it'll fire and click in. Once it clicks in, it'll send air and make the device go into the out or up position. And that'll cause, in this case, rollers to come up. Okay, so when we let go, it's going to actually, so there's two, as you can see in this diagram, there's two tubes right here. So right now when it's in the off position, it's actually sending air through one of these tubes, and it's keeping it in the off or down position. Once we fire it, it switches from this tube and sends air to this tube, and this is going to actually cause it to activate and fire. So if you're troubleshooting something like that, that's ultimately where to start. You come over here, this is just a manual fire button. Fire it, make sure it sounds properly, make sure it's firing right. This is actually moisture coming out, so that means that we're going to need to drain our air compressor tank. You never really want to see too much moisture, so I'll do that right after the video. But that is a basic rundown of a Mac valve. They're really simple, they're really easy to use. If you come up here, this is the normal setup that you're going to see for a wrap. So this first air gauge here in line, that's going to be your air out or away from the car. So when it's not fired, our sitting position is out away from the car. So that's what it's sitting there at 50 psi normally. So you never want to be any higher than 50 psi. As you can see, all these things are about at 50 psi, but 50 psi is going to be our out and sitting position. So if you ever see it higher or too low, you want to put it right about 50, but of course you always want to test everything, so it could sit a little lower, but you never really want it any higher than that. So if you ever want to adjust the out and away pressure, you're going to adjust it with this air gauge. If you pulled it out, turned it counterclockwise, that's going to lower it. Turn it clockwise, it'll raise it. As I said, adjusting chemicals is something you have to do very cautiously, because if you increase it too high, you can damage vehicles. So if you don't know too much about it, always ask for help, always have somebody there, and they can teach you how to do it properly. And this second air gauge over here on the right side, that's going to be your out pressure. So you can see there's no pressure right now because it's sitting in and it's on the in pressure. So it's on that sitting out and it's on the out pressure. So this is going to be your in pressure towards the car. So once I fire it, you'll see the pressure go up. Oh, that one didn't fire that well, so let's find one that does. So here we go. Once we fire it, we'll have the pressure go up and it'll be good. So you can see it moving. So these don't use very many pressure. This is about 5 psi. That's all it's going to ever need. And you can hear it firing properly. These ones use about 5 psi as well. So it will be really hard to see the movement, but it will move if it's something that uses a little more pressure. So all of these is about 5 psi, so when you fire them, you'll see the air gauge move just slightly, 5 psi up, and that's how they'll all work, and that's how they'll all fire. Of course, if I turned it up higher, it'd be more psi, it'd be harder to come out, but you never really want it, you only want to adjust about 5 to 10 psi. You don't want to do anything more than that because there's a great chance that you can damage a vehicle. If you ever have to go higher than that, that's probably because your bearings are bad and they need to be replaced. It's not always the case. It just depends from device to device and from make to make. But for our purposes, that's essentially my rule of thumb. Okay, so if you guys have any questions about that, always call me or put it in the comments. Just let me know. Hopefully this was helpful.